What's the crack, everyone? It's Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern, and the head instructor of Kern School of Combat. So, as some of you might have guessed from my previous video, I am a bit of a fan of the John Wick universe, and I recently went to see the fourth film. Now, minor spoilers ahead, so just be warned. But in the John Wick film, there is a duel at the end of it, and I thought it was quite an interesting thing to bring up that the duel in the film is very well done with regards to the rules and the kind of formal procedures that are taken for the duel to happen. Now, for those who don't know, there is what's often referred to as the dueling code or the code duelo. The one that was written for specifically for the use with pistols, as we see in the film, was actually written in Ireland. Now, there's variations of this that were set all over the world, and it wasn't a unique thing for there to be dueling codes. There was previous ones in different parts of the world at the time. However, the one that we are most familiar with in kind of, I guess, media and modern societies is the code duelo, which was written in Ireland. It was written in Ireland in 1777 and ratified in Clonmel in Tipperary by a number of people from kind of the surrounding counties. And originally there was 35 commandments in it. That was condensed down to 25 with 2 additional rules added into the Galway amendment of it, essentially. And then that framework was seen and used then all across Europe. Variations of it were seen in America and used there. And it's quite fascinating. It's something that I think a lot of people would not be familiar with unless they were looking into it. And dueling and the history of dueling in Ireland is quite fascinating because there's a lot of documentation of it. And obviously all different sections of society were doing it. And in the 18th century, it really reached a pinnacle in Ireland. There was a huge amount of dueling going on, to the point where the Irish almost became synonymous with it in Europe. However, we weren't the only people doing it, and it wasn't, uniquely fashionable in Ireland. It was very fashionable elsewhere in Europe. For example, in France, it continued well on into the 1800s. Yet, in Ireland, the dueling code was kind of written up and formally adopted, and was quite a interesting and unique thing. So I thought what I'd do is just kind of give you a very brief overview of that dueling code. If you'd like me to kind of do further videos on dueling, please do let me know. And even if you would like me to do a bit of a breakdown as to how the John Wick film covers the dueling code, I'd even be happy to do that. So if it's something that interests you, give a little comment. So, like I said, I thought I would just touch on a few of the rules themselves. So initially, the first basically about 10 rules all apply to the formalities around dueling, and basically the slights that allow for dueling to occur, and basically how to kind of back out of it. So for example, if you apologized, you were given multiple chances to apologize if you were the one who caused the slight, so to speak. And with that, there was often a number of chances given for the person to basically get their way out of it. So you have the initial, essentially, like 10 rules are based around this. Rule number 11 kind of covers the offences originating towards a lady's reputation. So, for example, the reasons why you could incur a duel. Number 12 is where we kind of get into the little bit more nitty-gritty things. That's where you basically get the options of things to basically occur the duel with. So a small sword, for example. And in that case where you choose that, you have the duel will basically continue until blood is drawn. And when that is done so, both will sheath their swords. So there is a very formal rule set to it. Rule number 13, for example, is quite interesting. No dumb shooting or firing in the air is admissible in any case. The challenger ought not to have challenged without receiving offence, and the challenge ought, if he gave offence, to have made an apology before they came to ground. Therefore, children's play must be dishonourable on one side or the other, and is accordingly prohibited. So, for example, faking a shot, pretending to shoot, shooting away from the person on purpose, all of these things were prohibited and very much frowned upon and basically considered dishonourable and something that you shouldn't do. Interestingly, rule number 14, seconds should be of equal rank to the principals. In other words, if I were to have a second, this would be the person who would basically look after me. There would be the person who would attend me to those grounds. They would look after the weapons. Again, they had very specific roles during this. They have to be of an equal standing because they could stand in for me should I wish for them to do it. This could happen for both parties. Often this did happen where people would say, you know what, I would rather my friend here does it for me. And it's quite an interesting bit of history around that happening in different shows. Again, something I can cover at a later date. Rule 15, challenges are never to be delivered at night unless the party challenged intends on leaving the place before morning. So again, you're setting in provisions of like when and how it can happen. This is kind of why we often see it done at dawn or midday. Basically just it's guaranteed light and it's not going to be nighttime. But interesting that the provision's given if the person has to leave that, we'll do it at night if you must. Rule number 17, the challenged chooses the ground, the challenger chooses the distance, the second fix the time and terms of firing. So again, the seconds having very specific roles that they have to adhere to. Rule number 18, the seconds load in presence of each other. So in other words, they load the guns to make sure there's no shenanigans going on, that someone's not putting in additional powder or additional shot or anything that could be untoward to kind of cheat. Rule number 19, firing may be regulated, first by signal, secondly by word of command, or thirdly at pleasure, as may be agreeable to the partners or to the parties. In the latter case, the parties may fire at their reasonable leisure, but second presence and rests are strictly prohibited. In all cases, a misfire is equivalent to a shot, a snap, or a non-cock, and is to be considered a misfire. So just on those two as well, it's while we often see 10 paces as kind of the agreed upon thing, or 20 paces or 30 paces, these would vary depending on what was the preference of the people at the time. Obviously closer would be considered more dangerous. And obviously provisions made for misfires, because very common for a pistol, and especially a flintlock or a black powder weapon to misfire, so provisions had to be made for that. Rule number 21, seconds are bound to attempt a reconciliation before the meeting takes place or after sufficient firing or hits are as specified. So there's always a way out. Death is always kind of considered the last option. The seconds would even meet prior to see if there's an agreement that could be made. Could the person be paid off? Could they take an apology in person, in writing, whatever? There was always a way to avoid bloodshed, and there was many steps that went to for that to happen. And many of these things were kind of done in the heat of the moment, and often when cooler heads prevailed, there was steps to stop bloodshed. Rule number 22. Any wound sufficient to agitate the nerves and necessarily make the hand shake must end the business for that day. So in other words, if your hand's wounded and you can't shoot properly, even if it's a grazing shot, the duel is over until either you wish to return to the dueling ground or you are therefore considered a loser. Rule number 23. In cause of meeting be such a nature that no apology or explanation can or will be received, the challenged takes his ground and calls on the challenger to proceed as he chooses, in such cases firing at pleasure in the usual practice, but may be varied by agreement. Number 24. In slight cases, the second hands his principal but one pistol, but in gross cases 2, holding another case at the ready, charged in reserve. So in other words, one shot could be taken, and then rather than having to go back, reload and go again, a second will be ready to go should it need be. And 25, where seconds disagree or resolve exchanges and resolve to exchange shots themselves, it must be at the same time and at right angles with their principals. If with swords side by side with 5 pace intervals, note, all matters and doubts not herein mentioned will be explained and cleared up by application to the committee, who meet alternately at Clonmel and Galway at the quarter sessions for that purpose. So in other words, if there's a disagreement between the seconds, a duel could take place with them for it to be resolved so that the duel may then continue, which is kind of shows you the levels at which people are willing to go with this. The other two provisions that were made for the Galway articles were as such. Rule number 1, no party can be allowed to bend his knee or cover his side with his left hand, but may present at any level from the hip to the eye. And 2, none can either advance or retreat if the ground be measured. If no ground be measured, either party may advance at his pleasure, even to touch muzzles, but neither can advance on his adversary after the fire, unless the adversary steps forward on him. Note, the seconds on both sides stand responsible for the last rule being strictly observed, bad cases having accrued from neglecting of it. So, very, very interesting. A very in-depth set of rules. And as you can see, there's numerous ways for people to back out of the challenge, which was more common than people think. It wasn't simply I challenge you to a duel and we meet the next morning. There was many steps given for people to be able to back out of it. But I just thought a very fascinating bit of Irish history that I think is very rarely talked about and very rarely covered. Ireland, like I said, was almost an epicenter for dueling in the 18th century and on. Obviously to the point that we were the ones who wrote up the code for dueling. Now obviously this was adopted elsewhere around the world, it was modified, it was changed, there was regional variations and so on and so forth. But I just thought a really fascinating video to kind of highlight what it was and how it plays into Irish history. Like I said, if you'd like further videos with further breakdowns on it or kind of different interesting situations of duels throughout Irish history, I'd be more than happy to do videos on them. Just leave me an old comment down below. I do my best to respond to every single comment that's put on the channel to the best of my ability. So, once again, I'm more than happy to do that as well. If you'd like further breakdowns of any duels, like I said, more than happy to do the one in John Wick as well and compare it to the Code Duelo. Obviously, in his world, they might have their own unique duels. And if you'd like to support my work, you'll find my Patreon in the description below. If you'd like to attend a class, you'll find the same. There's a lot of interesting projects on the way, and I really do appreciate everyone's support. Weather's getting nicer, there's going to be a lot of fun outdoor videos on the way too. Once again, all, thank you very much for the support. I really do appreciate it. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers, so please do like and subscribe. Once again, thank you very much, and so long.